Hello everyone, and welcome back for another RGB RPG's DM prep guide. Today we're going to be looking at Session 6 of our Candlekeep Mysteries campaign, and as always, this video will contain spoilers. So if you are a player in a Candlekeep game, or plan on being one, go ahead and click away. If you're a DM who wants some insight into how another DM might run this, go ahead and check this out. We're going to have a lot of interesting stuff in this one. So, last session our players made their way to the far north of the Sword Coast up towards Silvery Moon. They did this following the map that they were able to find in a book brought to them by a raven. The map showed this. No one in Candlekeep had heard of which way, except for they finally found out that it might be located up by Silvery Moon. So they were directed there, given permission to use Candlekeep's teleportation circles to get there, and when they got to Silvery Moon, the dominantly elvish city, but open to all, beautiful place, some really cool scenery in that last session. But they were able to figure out the location of which way, and also the fact that the area had been recently plagued by a lot of shadow crossings popping up and spilling out evil into the world. Which way having been one of the major victims of that event. So the players were able to get that information, how to get to which way, and when they got there, they did find the place to be a rather bleak and sorrowful place. Overrun by undead, mainly the guards who had once made it their duty to protect Witchway, now doing so after their death, but seeing any interloper as evil. They were led by a revenant, and that was the fight that ended the last session. They're still mid-fight during that. They're still in the middle of that fight when we come back to meet them at the beginning of this session. So, we have a pretty interesting fight going on at the beginning. Combat's always a great way to start the session. Took that right out of Sly Flourish's book, but a combat is always a great way to start a session. So whenever I can, I like to start the players in the action. So when we join back up with them, they just dropped that revenant into the well. Something attacked it on its way down and is now making its way back up and out of the well. That something is one of my all-time favorite creatures to use, the lonely Soros Horn. The Soros Horn are fantastic enemies. Whenever you really want to creep your players out, or you really want to create a sense of emotion, or portray a specific emotion, I always recommend checking out the Soros Horn, especially if you're in a very dark setting, like the Shadowfell or someplace that is affected by the Shadowfell. So, we come back to the party in the middle of this fight. It is a very difficult fight. As you can see, the Sorrowful Embrace alone has a pretty crazy damage output. We have a few things in place to mitigate this so that we don't end up with a TPK, or we avoid it if we can. And one of those is that the Revenant could climb back up and out of the well and rejoin the fray on the side of the players, seeing that they are fighting this evil that it is also fighting, and attempt to help the players out with that. Alternatively, the Soros Horn, I really like to have them... the Lonely embraces people that it wants to... that it sees. It is drawn towards people and wants to hold on to them because it is lonely. It is an embodiment of that emotion. And so once it realizes that the person that it is holding on to, that it is embracing, is no longer moving, it loses interest and moves on to the next. So what that means in game is that if a player being held by a Soros Horn is dropped to 0 hit points, it will be immediately released, and then the Soros Horn will go on to the next target, giving the players the opportunity to revive fallen teammates as they need to. But still a very dangerous encounter. A single Lonely is well capable of wiping out an entire party like this if you just let them have at it without any sort of fail-safes in mind. So keep those in mind if you do plan on running one of these, especially for a party of level 3, which we're running now. They can be very dangerous. But yeah, that is how we enter into the session today. After that, they continue following the map, and we have 2 more locations fleshed out on this map. We have the Wood Bridge and the Scorch. The Wood Bridge is a pretty fun one. It is a classic D&D, a classic fantasy encounter of trolls on a bridge, right? So, the bridge is going to be tricky. It's going to be dangerous. Players might fall into one of the gaps. They might get pushed into one of the gaps. A troll might try to drag them down into that ravine while they'll be cut off from their friends and having to fight the things alone. So the drop here is only going to be about 15 feet, enough to do a little bit of damage if they do drop into it. The water down below is super shallow. And, yeah. Trolls are a super classic encounter, and I haven't used them in a while, so I'm like, hey, there's a bridge there, let's throw some trolls in. Trolls are great to run, especially for newer players that haven't really gotten a chance to experience them yet. Just the fact that their limbs can detach and then move around on their own autonomously, and then they can reattach them, their regenerative properties. So many cool things about trolls that make them a super scary and fun encounter. And then we have the Scorch. That is going to be the Scorch of the Red Worm right here. And I kind of went a little bit deeper into that than I was planning to. I had a bit of a lore there that they'll be introduced to by a new NPC. So we're right here. And an NPC by the name of Kendrick Oso is going to be there. He's a mercenary who works to better the situation of a gang of street urchins back in Neverwinter. He goes out, collects as much money as he can, and brings it back to them to feed them, house them, clothe them, and make sure that they're living out of the squalor that he grew up in. I based his character off of Amos Burton from The Expanse. Fantastic show and even better books if you are interested in science fiction. I highly recommend them. But he's heavily based on that character. A remorseless, almost mechanical nature, but everything that he does, he tries to weigh on this scale of good and evil, and tries to stay on the balance of good. He wants to be able to tell himself that he's a good person, even if the things that he does could be construed as brutal sometimes, and the actions of a bad guy. He does everything from a place of meaning well and wanting to help. So yeah, Kendrick Oso, he heard about this potential horde that was left behind there. That an ancient black dragon and an ancient red dragon had crossed paths. The red dragon heard of this massive horde the black dragon had been amassing and then came to claim it for its own. The fight destroyed them both, leaving behind only a single black dragon, a single young black dragon to claim the horde as its own, the spawn of the black dragon that was there. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting fight. If they do decide to follow the lead of this mercenary who's scouting out the crater, and they do decide to try and claim part of that treasure for their own, or for Candlekeep, they are in for a fight with a young black dragon, which is going to be a very dangerous fight and super fun. I'm really hoping they come to this, because if they do, it'll be their first opportunity to fight a dragon in this campaign of Dungeons and Dragons. So yeah, dragons always read their stat block, fully understand what they're capable of. We've got a line weapon attack for their main attack. Of course, the big fly speed. There's no water here. The water is going to be at the bottom of this. It's going to essentially be a deep pool at the bottom of this crater. But yeah, potentially awesome fight on that one. And on that note, I do expect this to be a pretty combat-heavy encounter, a pretty combat-heavy session. We've had a lot of roleplay sessions. We've had a lot of sessions that have one brief encounter on a battle map. Really wanted to make this one, if the players kind of go in that direction, of course, a combat-heavy session where we could have 2 or even 3 combat encounters break out. And that really is as far as I expect the session to get today, is to the Scorch of the Red Worm, and then with that fight, I expect it to not get much farther than that. But if it does, we do have the Shallot Branch Facts fleshed out a little bit, where there is a kindness of were-ravens that are currently squatting, calling in the house home base. The little girl who sent the raven to the party indeed thinks that these ravens are squatting, but they're really there to guard a shadow crossing. It'll later be revealed that the shadow crossing is the source of all of the other ones popping up all over the place. And it is a permanent shadow crossing. It is stuck open. It is in the grave of one of the Branch Facts children. So yeah, the ravens are not going to be confrontational. If the players do get Shallot Branch Facts, the ravens are going to very much try to scare them away by making the players think that the house is haunted. It's a little bit haunted, but not as haunted as the were-ravens are trying to make it out to be. So yeah, if they do get there, then we'll have a little bit of a haunted house exploration. And we do, of course, have our original map, or our recreation of the Shallot Branch Facts map off of the original. So if you want to check this map out, it is usable for all kinds of other situations. The damage and debris in there is stamps from Gabriel Picard off of Roll20's marketplace, so those can easily be removed. But yeah, this is available on the Patreon. Links are below for that, as well as a whole bunch of other maps and other content for everyone to check out. And yeah, so we have a bit of loot to go over. Of course, we have the Scorch that we just saw as one of our notable locations. We have the Revenant is still possibly in play. The Lonely is going to be the first big combat, the first big challenge to overcome. Then the Trolls and the Young Black Dragon. Again, anytime you run a dragon, read that stat block, make sure you know it inside and out. You want to be able to really show off the danger of the dragon and really make it a very cinematic experience, and having to constantly check back for what ability does what kind of breaks that cinematic experience. So read the stat block ahead of time, especially for complicated creatures like dragons. We have a couple different roles on the DMG tables today. We have the Troll Horde, the trolls on that bridge. They've been waylaying travelers for a while now, stealing from them and whatnot. So the trolls have a small horde. We have one role on the DMG 0 to 4 table there. And then we also have the Black Dragon Horde, and if they do decide to fight that and claim that horde, they have a chance for some really good loot. We're going to roll on the 5 to 10 CR DMG table, but we are only going to use the first half of that table to kind of make sure that they don't get rewards that are too high of level for them. But that is about it, everybody. Thank you very much for watching, and remember that these videos do arrive on my Patreon a full month before they get to YouTube, so if you're running the campaign and you really want some extra insight into it, check out the Patreon. You can also find all the maps that I use for this campaign there as well, and a whole bunch of other content. So, thanks for watching, everybody, and have a good one.